1, 2, 3, 4!
Hey, how you going there, peeps? Phil here from MTG Kiwi Philosophy here again, bringing you yet another deck tech. This time it's an F&M special. I played this one the other night, it works really well, and this is my Abzan Beatdown Reanimation Deck. Okay, well let's get straight into it and we'll talk about our build-arounds. And our first of our two build-arounds is 3 copies Ajani, Adversary of the Tyrants. Yeah, it's a 4-drop Planeswalker with 4 loyalty, with a +1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures. Secondary ability is being able to return a creature with a converted mana cost of 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. And finally, the emblem is -7, and you get an emblem at the beginning of your end step. You get to create 3 1/1 cat tokens with lifelink. So there we go. And of course, to match with this baby, we have 2 copies of Vraska, a Relic Seeker. She's a 6-drop, 6 loyalty, +2, which is fantastic. Create a 2/2 pirate with menace, -3, destroy target artifact, creature, or enchantment, and you get to create a treasure. And finally, the -10 is target player's life total becomes 1, which is fantastic. Okay, well let's get straight into our deck and talk about how it fits in with our build-arounds. And the first of our cards is 4 copies of Mentor of the Meek. Mentor of the Meek is a 3-drop, 2/2 human soldier. Whenever another creature with a power 2 or less enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay 1. If you do, draw a card. Now the fantastic thing about Mentor of the Meek is the synergy it works with Ajani is that we've got those 2-drop creatures that are becoming from the graveyard back into play. And of course, we've also got the 2/2 pirates that are becoming from Vraska. So it's really fantastic. So that's going to give us a card engine, and this is how we're going to get advanced on the board faster than our opponent, is by playing a lot of our 2-drop creatures. So let's get into our 2-drop creatures, and the first of our 2-drop creatures is we're going with 4 copies of Ravenous Chupacabra. It's a 4-drop, 2/2, and when it enters the battlefield, we get to destroy target opponent's creature. Now, the fantastic thing about this is not only are we going to be able to destroy our opponent's creature, but we're also going to be able to draw a card off this bad boy. Okay, so the downside is we can't return it to play with Ajani, but it doesn't matter because having a creature that destroys a creature and advances our board and then draws a card, which is also going to keep our hand nice and full, is fantastic for our deck. Alright, let's move on to the next card, and we have 4 copies of Dire Fleet Poisoner. Now this 2-drop is fantastic because it's 2/2 and it has flash and death touch. And whenever the Dire Fleet Poisoner enters the battlefield, target attacking pirate you control gets +1/+1 against death touch. So for example, if we decide to swing in with our menace creature from Vraska and then they decide to block, we can flash this in, remove 2 of their creatures. It's great pseudo removal, and it's also pseudo removal for when we're blocking as well. The other great thing about it, it's a 2-drop, so when it enters the battlefield, we can pay 1 and use the Mentor of the Meek, draw a card, or we can return it from the graveyard to the battlefield with Ajani. And also, if we use Ajani's ability, we can still pay the 1 and draw a card from that as well. So that is fantastic for us as well. So you can see how this synergy is looping over and it's really doing a favor for us. Okay, let's move on to the next card, and we're going to synergize a card that's going to tie all of this together, and that is 3 copies of Dauntless Bodyguard. Now the Dauntless Bodyguard's fantastic because it's a 1-drop and it's 2/1, but you know, as it enters the battlefield, we can choose another creature we control, and if we sacrifice the Bodyguard, we can give it indestructible to the end of the turn. So the thing is that we play this early, sure, we get in some early damage, and it's a creature that we can also trigger with the Mentor of Meek, and we can return it to play with Ajani. Now the fantastic thing about the ETB trigger of this creature is that we can ETB, and all of a sudden we can protect the things like our Dire Fleet Poisoner, and then we've got an indestructible death touch creature, and that is fantastic. And then the same thing is we can use Ajani's ability, return it to play, and we get the Mentor trigger, and then we're also giving our creature the death touch, and it's giving a beautiful sort of flow between these 3 or 4 cards, which is fantastic for us. Alright, well let's move on to our next 2-drop creature, and that is 3 copies of Kinjalli's Sunwing. Now it's a 3-drop 2/3 flyer, but the bonus is creatures your opponent control enter the battlefield tap. So this is going to help us when we want to get aggressive and get that damage in. It's also going to help us for our any opponents that may have anything with haste. So it's really good. Once again, this is going to get us triggers from the mentor, and it's also got evasion as well, so that's really going to help us too. We're also going to go with 2 copies of the Everdawn Champion. It's a 3-drop 2/2, but prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to the Everdawn Champion. So this is really good for us because at the point where we want to be starting to stall our board, sometimes we want to be able to get wide a little bit later, and this is a great card for it. It triggers the Mentor of the Meek. We can return it to play with Ajani, and of course it just prevents all combat damage. Yeah, it's got a little bit of weakness to spells and of course trample, but if we can get some +1 counters on it from Ajani, and then all of a sudden things get a little bit out of hand for our opponents, and it's really going to be tough for them to get through our defenses, and then from there forward we just start marching in and just mashing up their creatures. Alright, let's move on to our next creature, and that is 2 copies of Shalai, Voice of Plenty. This 4-drop 3/4 angel has flying, and you, planeswalkers you control, and other creatures you have hexproof. And if you pay 6, you can put a +1 counter on each creature you control. So once again, her and Ajani together putting +1 counters on our creatures is going to be fantastic for our advancing our board. She's also protecting our creatures, which is fantastic. So it means our opponents aren't going to be able to easily remove stuff off our board. They're going to have to target her before they can remove anything else. The only thing we've got to be really careful about is those board wipes, which everyone is susceptible to. Alright, well, let's move on to some more protection for our creatures, and we're going to go with 2 copies of Make a Stand. Now, Make a Stand is a 3-drop instant speed. Creatures you control get +1 and gain indestructible till the end of the turn. So this is going to be fantastic for us if we decide to attack in, and then our opponents want to use some sort of a mass pump trick, or say if we want to defend and our opponents want to try and blow us out. We've got the defense and the means to be able to make sure that we can protect ourselves and make sure that we don't get blown out and remove some of their stuff from the board as well. It's a great way for also protecting Shalai, protecting the Mentor of the Meek, and any other of our very key cards that are quite important to this deck's synergy. Alright, and we're going to go with a few more protection cards, and that is 3 copies of Adamant Will. Now, Adamant Will is another fantastic card. It's a 2-drop instant speed. Target creature gets +2/+2 against indestructible till the end of the turn. So it's also a pump spell, as well as being able to give our creature indestructible. So once again, great for offensive and defensive purposes. Great for keeping certain creatures that are synergized and key to our deck. And finally, let's move on to some more removal, and we're going to go with 4 copies of Ixalan's Binding. This 4-drop enchantment is very important because it can single out an opponent's power play of a creature or any other permanent and basically exile it, and they can't play any more of it. So it's really important. The only downside to having an Ixalan's Binding is being Ixalan Binding on your binding. So we're going to have things in our sideboard that can counteract that. But in the meanwhile, the point of this is that we need to be able to remove key cards from our opponent's deck to be able to gain presence and gain advantage. Okay, well, this is our deck here, so let's move on to our land, and then we'll talk about our sideboard. Okay, well, let's get straight into our land then. We're going to go with 3 copies of Isolated Chapel, 3 copies of Woodland Cemetery, and 3 copies of Sunpetal Grove. Now, we're also going to have 2 copies of Memorial to Folly. We're going to have 7 plains and 6 swamps. Okay, and that's basically going to be it. Now, the great thing about having Memorial to Folly in our deck is we're going to be able to return creatures like the Ravenous Chupacabra back to our hand to be able to do its double up work again by removing a creature and drawing us a card. So that's going to be fantastic for us. And the others is really going to help us with our fixing to make sure that we can get that green mana so we can use Shalai's ability or get Vraska into play. Okay, well, let's move on to our sideboard now, and we're going to start with some extra removal, and we're going to go with 4 copies of Cleansing Nova and 3 copies of Settle the Wreckage. Now, these 2 removal cards are very important because if we have Ajani and also Vraska in play, wiping the board is not going to be a problem for us, because the fantastic thing about that is that we can use Ajani to return a 2-drop creature from our graveyard to play, and we can also use Vraska to create a pirate. The following turn, they both get +1/+1, and we're back on top again, and we're gaining an advantage because we're going to be able to get some more card draw, because we know that we don't want to play too many mentals of Meek, because if we have multiples of them in play and we get removed, we're losing that advantage to the card draw. Okay, let's move on to the last piece of removal on the sideboard, and that is 3 copies of Take Vengeance. Now, Take Vengeance is in here for the same reason that we have the Kinjalli Sunwing, because our opponent's creatures are going to be coming into play tapped, and yeah, it's sorcery speed, but a 2-drop removal card is fantastic, and we know that when it comes to our turn that the opponent's creature is going to come into play tapped. So that is going to be fantastic for us. But once again, we do need to move on and make sure we've got a little bit more creatures in the deck, and we're going to go with 2 copies of Baird, Steward of Argive. It's a 4-drop 2/4 legendary creature with vigilance. Creatures can't attack you unless they pay 1. So that's fantastic for us as well. So it's making our opponents use their mana to be able to attack us. But the fantastic thing about Baird is it comes into play, he triggers the Mentor of Meek, and we can also get, put +1 counters on him, and he can attack with vigilance, which is going to be a great attacker for us. Okay, and the last of our creatures we're going to have in our sideboard is 3 copies of Mesa Unicorn, a 2-drop 2/2 creature with lifelink. Now, the fantastic thing about the Mesa Unicorn is, once again, being able to come into play, it triggers the Mentor of Meek. You can return it to play from the graveyard with the Ajani, and it's also got lifelink. So being able to put those +1 counters on it and give it a bit of growth, and then also being able to swing and or even defend just to give us that little bit of extra life gain to get us to the next phase in our game. And this is how the game works. Alright, well, that's it, guys. This is me here from MTG Kiwi Philosophy. I'm Phil. I hope you liked the video. Smash that thumbs up button, subscribe, share, do what you want. And for those Patreons out there, I've got the extra video for you guys with some gameplay of this. So, I'll catch you on the flip side. Ciao.